Good evening. Thank you so much for spending your Thursday evening with us. We still have students checking in, but we are going to start on time and move through the material pretty quickly and get you on your way. But I promise you that the time that you're going to spend here is very worthwhile. This is going to be informative, insightful. There will be some aha moments. You will, I think, rely on this information quite a bit as you execute your own job searches. On behalf of Business Career Services, again, thank you for being here. I'm Jennifer Jordan and would love to acknowledge Engineering Career Services and our MBA program who are helping to co-sponsor this event. And in the interest of moving right along, I am going to pass the spotlight to Steve Dalton, our guest of honor, author of the 2-Hour Job Search, visiting us from Duke University. He'll tell you a little bit more about his background, and we'll jump right into the material. Help me in welcoming Steve Dalton.
Thanks, Jennifer. So I'm told this is the equivalent of your Friday night, and I appreciate what a gift you're giving me by giving me 2 hours of time on your Friday night. I'm going to do my best to give you the maximum return on effort of that investment as possible. So really quick bit of bio so we can get to the good stuff. I was a former chemical engineer. Any other engineers in the audience? My people? Excellent. Any MBAs in the audience who are also engineers? Congratulations on also finding a way out. So I escaped engineering by going into strategy consulting. I did that for a few years, but the dream all along was to go into marketing. So I went back to business school, got my MBA from Duke at Fuqua, got my dream job in marketing, selling delicious Pillsbury biscuits in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Realized very quickly I hated my dream job. Then realized very quickly I had no idea how to find a job when there was no on-campus recruiting. So what did I do? Naturally became a career coach. Thought that would just be for a year, but ended up falling in love with this industry. I've been doing it for 12 years now. It's amazing to me. It feels like such a privilege that I get paid to address a universal source of anxiety. And it just strikes me as insane that for a universal source of anxiety, more people don't spend more time thinking critically about how to make it better for people. So it's always been hard for me. It's never been natural. This whole, like every career advice or every career coach I've ever had has always been naturally charming. I am not that. So again, I'm a former chemical engineer. I'm bred for awkwardness. So what I'm about to teach you is designed for people to whom this has never come naturally. For those of you who it comes naturally too, I will make you better at what you do. But if you're feeling like overwhelmed by this stuff, don't feel like you're behind the 8 ball, because everybody's pretty clueless on how to do this. And if I can do it, you should be able to too. So without further ado, let's start up with a warm-up. Here's a pop quiz. So Dan Ariely, he's my colleague at Fuqua. He wrote a wonderful book called Predictably Irrational. One of his experiments, so he's a behavioral economist. One of his experiments fundamentally changed how I do my job, and it's the couch experiment. So I want you to listen to this. As I'm describing the experiment, I want you to decide which approach you think would be the most effective. Okay, so there's 3 approaches to choose from. In this experiment, he had an experimenter moving a couch out of a moving van up to a walk-up apartment with no elevator. So but the experimenter could not move the couch themselves. They had to ask somebody passing by in the street if they'd be willing to help. They tried one of 3 conditions. A control condition: can you help me move this couch? I can't do it myself. A token wage condition: can you help me move this couch? I can't do it myself. All I have is $5 on me, but if you can help me, it's yours. And a fair wage condition: can you help me move this couch? I can't do it myself. I've got $50 on me. It's what I'd pay a mover, but I need the help right now. Pick your favorite, and we'll do a poll right now. Who thinks that offering nothing at all would be the most effective approach? Smattering, okay. Thank you. Who thinks that offering a token wage, $5, would be the most effective approach? Ooh, a good chunk of the room. Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And who thinks that offering the fair wage, $50, would be the most effective approach? The economists in the room. Okay. 3 findings of this study. First finding: economists, you'll be happy to know that paying people a lot of money is a great way to get them to do things. That was the most successful approach. Kudos. Second finding: paying people nothing at all is just as effective as paying them $50 in terms of getting people to help you, except you save $50 in the process. So congratulations on those of you who saved that money. Third finding: offering people $5, which the economists and all of us would argue is better than $0, right? I'd rather have $5 here than 0. Far less effective than either of the other 2 approaches. So when Dan plotted these results out, he found there's an ambient success rate at $0 offered, a steep drop at $5, and a slow climb back up to parity until you hit market wage. So why would someone say yes for $0? You have no responsibility. Okay, so there's no pressure. If you do a bad job moving the couch, it's not on you. It's free help. You get what you pay for. Other reasons why you might say yes to agree to help for $0. You're the friend, favor. It feels good to do a good deed, good karma, pay it forward, all that stuff. So what his research showed was that whenever you offer people compensation, it's not that they think of doing people a favor plus $5. They stop thinking about doing people a favor altogether. And they start thinking in terms of hourly wage only. So as soon as you offer people compensation, you shift them from social norms to market norms. Why this resonated so deeply with me is when I've been taught by my career coaches in the past, they were always telling me to sell myself, sell myself. But in fact, every person who's ever helped me find a job has never personally benefited from doing so. Nobody ever got a bonus for bringing me on board. The stock price of General Mills did not shoot up the day that I started, I assure you of that. So the selling yourself concept is actually counterproductive. You risk moving people who are otherwise predisposed to help you towards actually not thinking in terms of favors and starting to think along metrics that are a lot harder to qualify for. So a common theme today, we're going to rely on social norms rather than market norms, and that means don't sell yourself. I know you've been told to do this 100 times, and for that, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you to deprogram from that because it is an outdated piece of advice that for most of us is counterproductive. That said, for those of you to whom selling yourself is natural and it's worked for you, you do you. Keep doing that thing. That's been great for you. But I don't know if you've ever seen someone sell themselves who's not good at selling themselves. It's super awkward. And so you do not want to see me selling myself because it's painful. So I'm here today to give you an alternative to that will help improve your results. Okay, so what's the alternative? That's the big question on everybody's mind. It's not job postings. Quick show of hands. How many of you have used Indeed.com? It's an online job posting aggregator. Raise your hands high, please, and keep your hands up if it's been successful for you. That's the problem with Indeed.com. And it's going to get hard. It's going to get less successful for you as you get more expensive to employ. It gives you the illusion of infrastructure, but in fact, it's a more efficient way to fall down a black hole. I think we all kind of know when you apply online for a job that doesn't come through the portal at KU, you're probably never going to hear back again, and that's absolutely true. The data bears this out. So this is the New York Fed. Brown, Cetrin, and Topa did a study in 2012 analyzing hiring practices at the Fed. They found that for every one person who was hired through an online job posting application, a certain number greater than one were hired through internal referrals. What do you think that number is? 5, 10, 10 is close, it's 12. So the reason I bring this up, the reason we're going to be talking a lot about networking today is not because I love networking. In fact, I kind of hate it. I do it because it works. Because the alternative is so bad. Not only when you apply online are you hoping that you're one of the handful of resumes they pick out of hundreds that have been dropped for that position, you're then hoping that that's the 1 out of 13 jobs that's going to go to an online job posting applicant also in the first place. So it's bad stacked on top of terrible. It's because the alternative is so bad. That's why I feel so strongly about networking. But if you're not naturally good at networking, where does that leave you? That's the problem. So if interviews, let's just break it down. Interviews, the best way to get interviews, according to the research that I found, is internal referrals, and that pretty much passes the smell test. Now the best way to get internal referrals is informational interviews. So how many of you are familiar with that term, informational interviews? Okay, about half. So let's break it down. Job interviews. When you go to a job interview, people ask you questions, you answer them, they give you a job, hopefully. There's good infrastructure. We all kind of know how those work. Informational interviews are a little bit like the opposite. You run the agenda rather than the company or the employer. So you have their time and you have to ask them questions that somehow lead you to an internal referral. So we'll demystify that as we get further in the process, but you own the agenda. We'll walk through how to do that later, but the best route to interviews is internal referrals. The best route to internal referrals is informational interviews. For the purpose of today, I'm going to use the term informational interviews, informationals, and networking interchangeably, because that's the most productive. It's the fastest route between point A and point B, between not knowing anyone at a company and getting an interview at that company. And that seems to be the biggest sticking point for people in terms of their job search. It's not passing interviews, it's getting the first interview in the first place. So that's really where my focus is today. Okay, so if we know networking is a great way to get jobs, and I think we've all intuitively accept that, why don't we do it? Yeah. It's uncomfortable. Tell me more about why it's uncomfortable.
Branching out to a new person isn't the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, you're asking people for help, and largely being self-reliant is what got you to a great school in the first place. Like, it's taking care of business. And now all of a sudden you need help from other people. It's really, who teaches you how to do that? Nobody. You just, all of a sudden you have to turn on a dime and ask people for help. So it's very uncomfortable. Any other reasons why you don't do it? Do you have tons of spare time laying around? No, it takes time, it's work, it's effort, and there are always going to be dogs that bark louder. All of your academics are required. All of your job search stuff is optional. So you've got these deadlines that you've got to manage in your life, and all of a sudden you've got this extra thing that has no deadlines that you also have to cultivate in your spare time that you don't have. So that also makes it difficult. A couple of factors that I want to call attention to. Performance anxiety, decision anxiety. So performance anxiety, you don't know what you're doing. You've never done this before. Yeah, that's really uncomfortable, and I don't like doing things that are uncomfortable. Decision anxiety, there's a term, paradox of choice. It's coined by Barry Schwartz. He's a psychology professor out of Swarthmore. He's kind of the expert on this topic. His research in a nutshell shows that the more options you're given, the harder it is to make a decision, and the less happy you are with any decision that you make. So we think we like choices, but they actually hurt us in the process. A good example of decision anxiety in action, this paradox of choice, is the careers section at the local Barnes & Noble. If you go to the careers section, you don't go there because you're looking for bunches of choices. You're looking for a book that helps you find a job. They don't give you that book that helps you give you a job. They give you dozens of options. So you have to actually do work to figure out which book you're going to buy before you actually get to the work of finding a job. And if you squint really hard, you can see my book, The 2-Hour Job Search, right there with some premium product placement. So thank you, Random House. Now, I don't feel decision anxiety when I see this bookshelf because I know that one of these books is far better than all the others. And that book is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Apparently, you can just reshelve that anywhere. But that's also a competitor to my book, because if you spend an hour reading The Hunger Games, it's pretty sure you're going to have an hour's worth of a good time. Every one of your academic classes, if you spend an hour more studying for a test, you're going to get an hour's worth of a better grade. So it offers you this immediate gratification, this benefit to investment of your time and effort. The job search doesn't work like that. So it's the same reason we prefer recipes to ingredient lists. When we like a dish at a restaurant or from a friend that cooked us something, we don't ask for a list of ingredients, we ask for a recipe, because recipes are replicable. If you follow a recipe, you know what to expect in terms of results. Ingredient lists aren't replicable, but my whole industry, the job search industry, is all about tips. Here's 50 tips, go figure it out for yourself. If it doesn't work, do more of it. The job search is a full-time job, it's on you, it's your fault, you're not doing it right. So let me make this very clear, this is not your fault. If you're feeling any anxiety or uncertainty about the job search, that is not on you. That's on our industry being very, very lackadaisical in terms of giving you something you can work with. So I do not give tips. I give you instructions. And what I'm going to teach you today is my recipe. So there are lots of possible solutions. I'm going to give you one possible solution. I've always been the kind of person that learns best from solution sets to problem sets that I've gotten. Show me how to solve it, and I can replicate that. So that's what I'm going to do with this problem of getting that first interview. I'm going to show you exactly how I would do it, knowing what I know now, informed by the latest and greatest science that I could find. It is my recipe for turning strangers into referrals, and therefore interviews. And so the 2-hour job search gets its name from the amount of time it takes you to start from scratch and boot your search up. Or reboot your search if you don't like the way that it's going. In 2 hours, you can put the strategy in place. Any further effort that day would be extraneous. Any less would be insufficient. So how do we do this in as effective, efficient, and a painless manner as possible? Now, there's only one way to eat an elephant, and that is one bite at a time. So we're going to split this elephant, because this is a monumental task, into its component parts. Those 3 parts are going to be prioritizing targets. Secondly, contacting employees at those targets. Thirdly, recruiting the advocacy of those employees. My request of you is, if anything I say sounds inefficient or squishy, challenge me, indulge the cynical nature, any kind of skepticism that you have towards this content, please exercise that. I want you to engage with this material. If anything I say sounds squishy, challenge me on it or ask me why I do it that way. Does that sound fair? All right, then we're going to start flying. With that, we're going to start with prioritizing employers. I'm going to talk you through something called the lamp list. In 70 minutes, it gives you the basic skeletal framework and helps you prioritize all possible employers into a logical subset and a logical order of attack. But before we talk about that, we need to talk about something nearer and dearer to my heart, which is reality television. How many Bachelor fans do we have out here? Proud Bachelor fans, thank you, yes. Excellent, excellent. How many of you are not Bachelor fans per se, but may have hate watched it once or twice or 10 times? Yeah, no, this is a judgment-free zone. Changing the channel is really hard. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, The Bachelor is terribly awesome television. There's a gender-reversed version called The Bachelorette. We're just going to focus on The Bachelor for simplicity's sake. So how this show works, fascinating. There's a bachelor that's selected, and 25 bachelorettes are furnished for him in a house. And each week he picks one or more of the bachelorettes to kick off the show until only one remains. And romance blossoms for a couple of weeks. For those of you who like visual aids, here's a picture of the bachelor, presumably toasting himself. Now, from a game theory perspective, this show fascinates me because if you're the bachelor on a show called The Bachelor, you're going to win. So hats off to you, sir. That is well played. On the flip side, I have no idea why a woman would go on this show or a guy in The Bachelorette because supply is artificially restricted, just one bachelorette. Demand is artificially stimulated, so 25 bachelorettes, that's 4% odds out of the gate. There's an opportunity cost. So to go on the show, you have to give up several months of normal dating. It's a blind purchase. You don't know until you show up on the first day that the guy you're fighting over is actually Juan Pablo. And it's all on national TV, which is a recipe for everyone's worst side. There's so much bad to this, I can't even call it bad game theory. It's just sort of the absence of game theory. I like to imagine these women are charming and delightful in their normal lives, but anyone in that circumstance is going to look desperate. I call this artificial desperation. And artificial desperation is hilarious when you're talking about reality television. It's heartbreaking when you realize that that's the default setting for pretty much every job seeker out there, though. Every time you apply to a job posting online, knowing that you're probably never going to hear back from it, you're basically putting yourself into the situation of one of 25 bachelorettes over and over and over again. And after a while, that takes a toll on your confidence and makes you seem a little bit desperate. And unfortunately, nobody likes desperate. Not our friends and family, our loved ones, our significant others, and definitely not employers. They want to hire people that give themselves options. So I would argue that this artificial desperation arises from voluntary fixation. It's the usual suspect problem. If I think I need to do a job search and I want a job in marketing, Procter & Gamble, Nike, the usual suspects, these big, gigantic companies that are the first that come into your mind, these are the ones you tend to focus on. But that's what everybody else is doing as well. So high competition, low odds of success. And it's just the first few companies we thought of. So are those really the best companies, or are those just the biggest names that we thought of? So the best way to avoid this voluntary fixation is to do a systematic brainstorm to ensure that the 5 companies that we might target first are the right 5 companies based on our own motivation, but also on data points that are predictive of success. So that's what the lamp list is. The lamp list makes you the bachelor in your own job search in 70 minutes of effort. The way that it does this is by using the 80-20 rule liberally. So 80-20 rule, are you familiar with that? 80-20 rule, also called the Pareto principle. The theory is that with 20% of your effort, 20% of your effort usually yields 80% of your results. So finding the 80-20 in any given situation, that's kind of the consummate collegiate skill. For example, in your academics, you're given 40 hours of reading, and you only have four hours to do it in. So you need to figure out how to prioritize which 4 hours is going to be the best 4 hours of that reading to do. Same thing applies to your job search. What's ironic, or I would say cruel about that, is being perfect is largely what got you into this school. Being perfect slowly is a behavior that's going to largely be punished from this point forward pretty consistently in your life. You need to adapt to being good enough quickly. That's the mindset of the modern business professional, or even the modern professional. So we're going to adopt this 80-20 mindset. We're not going to be perfect slowly because there's no such thing as perfect information anymore. We're going to be good enough quickly. So to do a list like this in 70 minutes, and the lamp list gets its name from the 4 columns of data that you're going to be populating. L is for the list of employers itself, A is for the presence of alumni, M is for your own motivation, P is for the urgency of postings. To do this in 70 minutes, we don't work horizontally. The temptation is to work horizontally. I know I want to work for Starbucks. Let me grab a lot of data for Starbucks that I may or may not use. That's very inefficient. So we're going to work vertically, get an economy of scale, like an assembly line. Do the same task over and over and over again so we can do it quickly and efficiently. So 80-20 rule to vertically to find 40 targets in 40 minutes, and then 3 data points for each of those 40 targets that are easy to find and predictive of success. So we're going to walk you through that now. Okay. The result of this will be a top 5 that will take it in the next phase of this process, the outreach process. By approaching 5 employers simultaneously, that ensures you're the bachelor in your own job search. You're not one of 25 bachelorettes over and over. So you can play these employers off of one another. If you don't get traction at one, you can move on to the next one. There's plenty of them. They are the inexhaustible resource. You are a finite resource. So you need to treat this like the bachelor that you are. Okay. So creating the L column, the list of employers in the first place, this is the creative part of this process, and I hate creativity. So I'm going to give you a systematic way to do this brainstorm because we want to skin the cat 4 different ways so we are free from the usual suspect problem. So 4 ways to brainstorm employers. So 40 employers in 40 minutes, that's the goal. That's overwhelming. We're going to split that in 4 different approaches, 10 minutes each. First approach is the dream employer approach. For this one, I just want you to do a brain dump of every employer you wish came to recruit on campus but does not. This process is to help you do your off-campus job search or your post-campus job search. Because on-campus recruiting, that's something that goes away after you graduate. You may never get it again unless you go to grad school. But this is the process you will use for the rest of your life. So use this to prioritize those big employers that you wish came to campus but don't. Google is your friend on this one. So if you know you want to do strategy consulting like I did out of undergrad, Google list of strategy consulting firms. Wikipedia will give you a list of 70 of them. You can just copy and paste that into your Excel spreadsheet, into your L column, and you'll be done. So you're just filling in the company names at this point. You're not grabbing data along the way. You're just getting company names. Now, for those of you who know you need to move to the Bay Area, you can Google list of companies headquartered in the Bay Area, list of companies headquartered in Austin, Texas. So if you're married to a specific geography, feel free to use that as your focus. Don't make multiple lamp lists, however. So if you're torn between, if you're in business and you're torn between consulting and marketing, my recommendation is just divide your time period in half. Spend half the 10-minute period, so 5 minutes on marketing firms, 5 minutes on consulting firms. Make sense so far? This is the brain dump. This is the usual suspects. These are the ones that you would normally start and stop with in terms of brainstorming your off-campus search. We want to capture them because they're highly motivating. They're big brand names typically. We just want to capture them and brainstorm beyond them. Okay, second approach is alumni. So for this, you can use your alumni database. I would use LinkedIn. It's more up to date. I would look up where people like me have ended up. It's easier to be the second KU grad at some place versus the first one because you know this company knows the benefit of your degree and they're willing to pay the premium required to attract you there. So I would follow in other people's footsteps. Let's look up LinkedIn. Put KU in the education field. Put a keyword in the job title like marketing or consulting and see where people like you have ended up. I want you to add 10 employers in 10 minutes based on that search. Err on the side of inclusion. So if you've never seen a company before, but it's in a good location and the company title, the job title looks right, include it now. It's like an assembly line. Adding units now costs you nothing. But going back and adding units at the end is very, very expensive in terms of time and efficiency. So if you don't know enough about a company to decide whether to include it, don't research it as you go. Then we're blending tasks. That's a very inefficient process. Err on the side of including it. When we get to our motivation column, we will mark the fact that we don't know what this company does yet. And we may go back and research it later, but we may not. Okay, third approach is the Indeed.com method. So that website I told you about, Indeed. Let's jump into that one, just in case you've never seen it before. Okay. So this is Indeed. It looks a lot like Google. So let's say I want to find marketing jobs. Type in marketing, and it will pull down all of the job postings for marketing. So 311,000 of them. How many of you are looking for internships right now? Okay, good chunk of the room. Watch what happens when you add the word intern. 300,000 becomes 10,000. So that's pretty universal throughout the course of the year. Whenever you look up the word intern, it's going to reduce your number of hits by a factor of 100. That doesn't mean it's a bad search term. It's a great search term. But just know how restrictive that one is. That would be the first one I would ditch if I'm trying to brainstorm companies and I'm not getting enough results in the geography that I'm targeting. Okay, so what we get here. We get a bunch of stuff. These look like internships. So let me show you what happens. What I want you to do is do your brainstorm based on this page and this page only. So you've got a job title, you've got a company name, you've got a location, and a couple sentences of description. If those all look good, err on the side of including that company in your list. Resist the urge to fall down the rabbit hole. So market communications intern, let's say that looks appealing to you. And you think, well, while I'm here, let me just click on this posting. You put yourself at risk of something called cognitive drift. In this context, cognitive drift refers to the phenomena where if a web page takes longer than a second to load after you click a link, you're at 50-50 odds of losing your train of thought and getting distracted. And distraction is your enemy in this process. That's how the 2-hour job search becomes the 20-hour job search. You just get curious. I don't want you to be curious. I want you to just execute, 80-20 rule. So let's say, okay, marketing communications intern. Let's click on it. 1,000, 1,000, starting to get hungry. Let's go get a snack. Okay, and it comes up. What we get is a job description, and I assure you, job descriptions are the most painful reading of all. It will tell you what you already know. You want a job. Yeah, that's what it says. Okay, we want someone with 10 years of previous experience, with 1 or more superpowers. Okay, that's great. Sure, let's apply. You figure, while I'm here, let's apply for this job, because there's this button here called Apply for this position. So you click on that, and it asks you to register probably. That's usually where they start. Asks you to upload a resume, answer some questions about yourself. And you're like, okay, while I'm here, let's do this. Problem is, and it may only take you 15 minutes as a best case, but the problem is every time you do it, it takes 15 minutes and a shred of your soul. And you only have a finite amount of spare time and shreds of soul to throw at this process. This is the absolute worst place to lose them because it makes you the bachelorette over and over and over again. You know you're never going to hear back. I recognize the irony of your job search is that, like when you apply to an online job posting, that's the only positive reinforcement you get in your job search until it's over, until you actually get an offer. It says, congratulations, your application has been successfully submitted. I'm asking you to give that up. I'm also asking you to give up the metrics by which you tell your family that you're trying hard. This is how you quantify your effort. I dropped 30 resumes. I applied to 10 different job postings today. I spent 6 hours surfing Indeed.com. Resist the urge to try to quantify your effort, especially when you know that effort is not going to be fruitful. What I'm going to give you is an alternative that is more predictably positive. 8 hours of effort will bring you 8 hours closer to employment. It is not this, though. Resist this urge. Use Indeed for what it's good at. And what it's good at is giving you ideas for employers in your target geography. So if you know you want to go to San Francisco, show me marketing intern positions in San Francisco. Now what you get are just companies that are based in San Francisco. So Expedia, Enterprise, Vita, Constellation Brands, Lit Motors, Arxon Technologies. If that's too many postings for you, add more search terms. Maybe technology, maybe gaming, mobile, whatever you're into. Add that until you get it down to a logical number. The goal is still 10 employers in 10 minutes. Okay, does that make sense? Use this for what it's good at. Resist the temptation to apply. If you find any perfect jobs, know that you'll be back to it within 70 minutes of effort. You'll be right back on that posting if it's a top 5 opportunity. Okay, fourth and final approach is the trend method. And this is for the Americans in the crowd. If you're an American, do the trend method. You consume information for free in your spare time a lot. So maybe you read Wired or Fast Company or Ad Age or Brand Week. You do that for free. Every day you get smarter and you're not getting paid for it. I want to find a way to get you paid for that because that's what you're getting better at every day. Read for fun for 10 minutes, except read mindfully. Anytime you come across a company doing something interesting, add that company to your list. You may only come up with 3 employers during this 10-minute period, but it will be a unique 3 employers that are probably not used to getting a lot of incoming attention from job seekers. You might be the only person who reaches out to an Inspire Learning this year to ask them why they're good at their job. So one informational goes a lot further with them than it would with a Nike, for example. However, if you are an international student seeking US employment, I'd recommend a different approach. There's a website called Redbus2US that will list for you H-1B sponsors. So look up a job title that you might want, like marketing, and it will return information like a pivot table. So it will say that Microsoft is the single biggest employer of people with marketing in their job title for H-1B visas. And then it will say second, here's the third most frequent, fourth most frequent. And you can just use that list to grab 10 employers in 10 minutes that are predisposed towards hiring international students for US employment. Okay, any questions about the L column of our lamp list? Yes? So the nice thing about Indeed.com is it operates in about 40 or 50 different countries, and it looks exactly the same. So to access that from the Indeed.com homepage, drop to the bottom of the page. So we're back in Indeed, click on Indeed, go to the bottom of the page, and click on countries. And then it'll give you here all the ones that it operates in. Unfortunately, you can't do multi-country searches. You've got to focus on one at a time. My caution to you would be make sure that you're work authorized to work there. So that will require some research before you want to go ahead and do this. Any other questions? Yes?
Would you recommend opening tabs when searching for your employers, or is that too distracting?
Opening tabs. Right now, all we're grabbing is company names. Yep, so we're working our way down a single column. The temptation to grab data as you go is going to be so overwhelming. But for this to work in 70 minutes, for this to work as elegantly as it is designed, it is a skeletal framework focused just on company names. We are just getting candidates right now. Don't grab data as you go, because for 75% of the companies that you're actually grabbing data for, we're never going to approach them. We're only going to really be focusing on 25% of them. We're going to let the data tell us who we should probably be focusing on, and we'll tweak that with intuition. But for most of these companies, we're never going to be doing anything with them. It's just brainstorming them so that we know we're the bachelor in this process, not one of 25 bachelorettes over and over. Good question. Yes?
If you're like interested in an employer, but it's not quite your degree match, you should still put it on there if you really like what they do.
Absolutely. I can't stress that enough. This process is riddled with rejection and getting ignored. I'm going to teach you something called the 4-point outreach email. The hit rate on a 4-point outreach email is going to be about 40%. Now, to the engineers in the audience, that sounds pretty good because that was named most of our tests back in the day. However, for the rest of you, 40% being a good response rate, it's going to take some getting used to because 100% is what you're used to. But the 40% who do respond are disproportionately likely to be helpful people based on the way that we write that outreach email. So it's critical that we start with highly motivating companies where if we get rejected or ignored 3 or 4 times, that doesn't stop us because they're our favorite employers. We're going to make this happen. So that is going to be the most important criteria, frankly. I so strongly advocate for you. If you think a company is cool, add it to your list. Do that. Because these are the ones that you're going to be excited to talk to, and that excitement is what's going to get you moved along in this process. Great question. Thanks for asking that. OK, so our next step is going to be alumni. This is, again, all of these data points are imperfect. They are proxies for perfect information. Alumni, the presence of alumni is a proxy for the likelihood of finding a sympathetic contact. So 80-20 rule, we're just going to fly through this column. It's going to take you 10 minutes. All we're going to do, go to LinkedIn, put KU in the education field, and one after the other, put these company names in the current company field. If there are 1 or more KU alumni working there, it gets a Y for yes. If there are 0, it gets an N for no. That's it. So you can do this in 10 minutes if you stay focused. For those of you who are of age, I recommend pouring yourself a glass of wine. This 10 minutes will be done before you know it. Keep simple tasks simple. Enjoy the quiet in your mind as you just do this grunt rote task, and enjoy not thinking for a little bit. That's really all there is to it. Any questions about that? OK. For those of you with grad degrees, use your most recent degree. Again, 75% of these companies we're never going to be approaching, so don't worry about drilling down and finding contacts for everybody yet. We don't know who the top targets are. This is just to get an overview of what our support networks looks like in this field. OK, motivation, that's my favorite column because it's the most important one and it's the shortest. So it only takes you 5 minutes. For this one, what we're doing is rating our pain tolerance. Motivation is a proxy for your pain tolerance, for getting ignored by these companies, yet continuing to be willing to try to get a new person to talk to you. So the way that we do this is we just use our gut feeling. When we see that company's name on a scale of 1 to 5, how motivated are we to reach out to them? And if they ignore us, reach out to somebody else. And if they ignore us, reach out to somebody else. If they're a dream company, it's a 5 out of 5. Second tier company, it's a 4 out of 5. Third tier company, 3 out of 5. Bottom tier company is a 2. I want you to save the score of 1 for any employer you don't know enough about to have an informed opinion. I don't want you to research as you go, because then we're blending tasks, and that's very inefficient. We'll just mark them as a 1, and we'll go back for the ones at the end of this process that give us a reason to believe that a minute of research is a good idea. So placeholder score, 5 minutes. We're using a concept here called arbitrary coherence, which means that it doesn't matter that we just made this scale up. As long as we do enough similar data points in rapid succession, our relative ratings are going to be highly accurate, even if our individual ratings are meaningless. So faster you go, the more accurate it'll be. Don't question why. Gut feelings are very important in this process. The heart wants what it wants. Capture that here. It's a blended average of everything you know about that company now and no more. Final column is postings. This is a proxy for urgency. So for this one, go back to Indeed.com. Well, for most of you, it will be going back to Indeed.com. I want you to rate each of your employer's current level of hiring activity on a scale from 1 to 3. So 3 would be very relevant hiring. If you're looking for a marketing internship and they have a marketing internship, that would be a 3 out of 3, relevant. You can apply for that theoretically right now. However, if they don't have any marketing internships, take out that word intern, because we know how restrictive that word is. See if they're doing any full-time hiring for marketing people. And if the answer is yes, then that would be a 2 out of 3. It's somewhat relevant. It's predictive. They may be posting an internship later. They just aren't doing it this early in the academic year. Or they may not need to post an internship because you'll go to them proactively and they'll decide they like you and don't need to post that job at all. So 2 out of 3 is somewhat relevant. Predictive, close to being right, but not right. And a 1 out of 3 is no relevant hiring. The theory here is if they've got a relevant job posting available right now, if we wait a few weeks to find an advocate there, we'll have missed out on it. So it's critical and time sensitive that we get an advocate there sooner rather than later. That's what we're capturing in this column on a 3-point scale. This will take you about 10 to 15 minutes. Make sense? OK, we're done. 70 minutes of effort. This is like a balance sheet for those of you in accounting. It's correct for a snapshot in time. This is not something we'll be constantly updating. This is not something where we'll have comment columns. This is all the data that we're going to be grabbing right now. A quick caveat. For those of you targeting social impact, I recommend swapping in idealist.org instead of Indeed. For those of you targeting government jobs, USA Jobs is going to be a better source than Indeed.com. For those of you targeting early stage tech, there's no job posting websites for that. AngelList is pretty good. But I'd recommend swapping in venture capital backing. So the recency of venture capital backing. If a company's gotten a new round of cash in the last 3 months, To me, they've got money to burn. That's a time-sensitive opportunity. That's a 3 out of 3. If it's been longer than 3 months but shorter than a year, that's a 2 out of 3. They may still have some money floating around that they haven't accounted for. And if it's longer than a year, it's a 1 out of 3. They're probably not in hiring mode, so it's a little less time-sensitive. Doesn't mean it's a bad target, especially if it's highly motivating, but it just means it's not time-sensitive. So how do we sort this list? Absolutely, the most important criteria is motivation. Your willingness to face down rejection is the engine that drives this process forward. So all of your 5s come before all of your 4s, which come before all your 3s. Now, your second level for your Excel sort is going to be postings, high to low. So the more urgent opportunities over the less urgent ones. 5 3s come before 5 2s, and so on. Your third tier is going to be alumni. That's going to be your tiebreaker. Yeses before nos. This will help us identify a top 5. Now, this is what the data says our top 5 should be, but the heart wants what it wants. So we need to tweak this for our own intuition. The common mistake job seekers make is they start with intuition and they finish with intuition. That's how you end up being the bachelorette over and over and over in your job search. You just focus on the usual obvious suspects. We've let the data take the first pass. Now we need to tweak it for our own intuition. So the way that we do that, I recommend 2 spots. Looking at your data to see if you want to make a change. First, Inkling Games, down at number 14. That is at the 5 to 4 cutoff. I recommend looking at the 5 to 4 cutoff companies that have reasons to believe research is a good idea. Inkling Games, not only do you have an alum there, but it's got a current job posting. I don't know about you, but knowing that a company had a current job posting might change my motivation a little bit. So I might change that motivation from a 4 to a 5 or 4 to a 6, resort the list, and it jumps to the top. So the motivation column becomes your fudge factor after you let the data take the first pass. Totally okay to modify that to make the top 5 look like the right top 5. Second place I want you to look is down at the bottom, Inspire Learning. So Inspire Learning, we don't have a contact there, but it's got a current job posting. We gave it a 1 because we don't know what they do. This would be a company worth Googling. With a minute of research, you could find out it's an educational entertainment software company based in Austin, Texas. Now, if you know you could never live in Austin, Texas, it's too darn hot, you change that motivation from a 1 to a 2, resort the list, and it falls to the bottom forever. You're fine. However, if Austin seems like a happening town and you could get behind working in the educational entertainment industry, change that motivation from a 1 to a 4, 1 to a 5, 1 to a 6. A single informational with Inspire Learning is going to go a lot further than a single informational with Nike. And that traction is going to help you with the bigger and more obvious employers that are on campus and off. Similarly, the traction you get on campus will help you with your companies off campus. So it's a virtuous cycle once you get it going. These people will make you smarter about that space. So don't rule them out of hand just because you've never heard of them initially. Research them strategically. So I recommend just focusing on the ones that have current job postings. Now, using this process, you'll identify, once you look at your top 5 and say, yeah, those are my top 5. Number 6 through 10, I like them a lot, but not enough to kick any of my top 5 out because we're going to start reaching out to 5 employers simultaneously. And anything below number 10, I'm comfortable never talking to them. I told you you'd only really realistically approach 25% of your companies. That's because using this process, once you get closure at one of your top 5, where they say, we'll interview you on December 15th, let us know if you haven't heard from us by December 1st, you're done with that company. So you have bandwidth to approach a new company because we want to stay the bachelor in our process. So the company that we add to this process is going to be company number 6. Institute of Play is next up. That's the only time you're reopening this spreadsheet, is when you have bandwidth to take on a new company. If another company says, I'm sorry, you're not work authorized to work for us, or you need to get experience before we'll consider you, okay, you cross them off the list. You moved on down to number 7. So this list is a source of relief. Rather than a source of anxiety. Don't update it, don't add information to this, only open it when you have bandwidth to take on a new company. Any questions about the lamp list? Again, this is not right for everyone. This is exactly what I would do if you said, Steve, you're fired, start looking for a job. Within 2 hours, I'd be done for the day. This is the first 70 minutes. I only have a finite amount of time and shreds of soul, so I want to make sure I'm aiming that at the right targets. So I'm going to let data tell me who the right targets are before I start introducing my intuition into this process. So let's recap this section. Big takeaways. Be the bachelor in your own job search. Don't be a bachelorette over and over again. Nobody likes desperate. Use the 80-20 rule. Don't be perfect slowly. It's going to get punished. Be good enough quickly. That's the modern skill set you need to develop. Third, start with data, finish with intuition. Don't start with intuition and finish with intuition. Only bad things happen there. Okay, as a result, we get our top 5 target employers with ranked backups. And let's do a quick quiz question. What's the correct sort order of alumni motivation and postings? What comes first? Motivation. What comes second? Posting, what comes third? Ha, love it. Thank you very much. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so let's talk about contacting employers or employees at these companies. First question I often get is, who should I contact? In order of importance, I would recommend functionally relevant people. If you want to do marketing, talk to someone in marketing. If you want to do graphic design, talk to someone in graphic design. Do not talk to HR. I know the intuition is, let's talk to HR. They know most about jobs. They're really difficult. They're really tricky to interact with unless you want to do HR. They're more like gatekeepers. They're kind of thinking about their own work. They're surprisingly awkward for a group of people that are supposed to be good at working with people. However, when you get referred to HR, then they're very, very nice to you. So focus on people with whom you could do a good informational because you genuinely care about the work that they do. And that means picking people who are functionally relevant. In the book, I recommend alumni over functionally relevant people. My school of thought on this has changed. Functionally relevant is the most important thing. Now, if you still have multiple options when you look for these people in LinkedIn, I recommend looking up fellow alumni. Choose someone from KU. If you still have multiple options, choose someone about 5 or 10 years senior to you. Senior enough that they hopefully have a promotion under their belt at that company, so some social capital to spend for the right job seeker. Not so senior that they're out of touch. That said, if nobody's in that Goldilocks zone, I'd recommend going more senior before I went more junior. Because senior people, if they're too busy to help you, they can hand you off to a subordinate who's suddenly very motivated to help you. A junior person, if they're too busy to help you, can't hand you up to their boss. So it gives you 2 bites at the apple. Okay, how should I contact him or her? That's the big question, and that's where we're going to dive back into the internet here. In order of decreasing return on effort, here's what I'd recommend. Now note, some of the hit rates lower on this list are going to be higher than ones up higher on the list, but because it takes more work, I de-emphasize them, I discourage them. You stay as high on this list as possible because it saves you time and effort. The best, by far, the best method for reaching out to people is LinkedIn groups, and I'll show you why these are so powerful in a moment. You're going to be doing this constantly, and this is incredibly powerful. It's the best kept secret in the job search process. The backup to that is fan mail. So if you read an article in Fast Company from someone working at a cool tech company, and you want to reach out to them to ask them about their company and their work, unfortunately no email addresses are included, so you've got to figure out what their email is so you can contact them. That's fan mail. So we'll talk about that. Invitations to connect are not awesome. They're not terrible. They're a good backstop. They're a good last case scenario. It's an aggressive way to say hello to someone. It's by saying, hey, make a permanent connection to me on LinkedIn, even though you don't know me yet. So use it as a backup. There are better options. The worst option is going to be LinkedIn second-degree connections, which might sound counterintuitive because that's what I thought LinkedIn was for. It's to find out who you know and who they know. It's a problem. It's 2 degrees of stranger very frequently, and I'll show you the best way to show you that is an example. So let's jump into LinkedIn here. Okay, LinkedIn. What I want you to get comfortable doing is when you go to LinkedIn, go to the advanced search field. The best way to access the advanced search capability is to click in the search box at the top. Don't put anything in there, just hit enter. When you do that, that brings up this new bar on the right here. Whoop. So that brings up this search bar right here. View, let's zoom out. This is what we want to work with because that's the most precise searches that you can do in LinkedIn. So I'm going to use the example of TiVo. Let's find a contact at TiVo. I was an early adopter of TiVo, big fan. So we're going to do TiVo. I'm going to, oops. So to find someone at TiVo, what I want to do, actually is not that. What I want to do is go to current companies and type in TiVo. I want to see current employees at TiVo right now. So what we're going to do is find a starter contact for each of our top 5 employers to reach out to. I recommend doing these in bunches of 2. So find 2 contacts at once because with a hit rate of 40%, more likely than not, you're going to need a backup person. Might as well get this all done at one time. So the first person, I'd say, okay, show me TiVo. And we see there's 1,500 people that work at TiVo. Okay, well, I want to find somebody in marketing because functional relevance is most important. So show me people with marketing in their job title. Now we're down to 38. Okay, well, a good tiebreaker is alumni. So show me people who went to my business school. Show me Fuqua. And I see, okay, no results. Okay, that's a bummer. So now I would look up my undergrads as a backup. So I went to Case Western. Unfortunately, it's all engineers and pre-meds, so not very helpful there. However, I went to grad school at Duke, so I have access to the Duke undergrad network as well. So let's say, show me Duke undergrads. So we go to Duke. And I see that we have one option left, Nicola Mattis, second-degree connection. So second-degree connections in LinkedIn, they just made a change earlier this year where the only people you're able to invite to connect are second-degree connections in the first place. If they're third-degree connections, you can no longer ask them to connect anyway. She's a second-degree connection, but I don't want to connect with her because that's a very forward way to say hello. Even if you customize the message, it's still very direct. There's a better way. The better way is not secondary connections in most cases. because when I click on my secondary connections, I see that they are Datavio and Guy, both of whom are wonderful people that I haven't spoken to in about 9 years. So if I reach out to Nicola using Datavio's name, for example, she might go back to Datavio and say, hey, what do you think of Steve? And she might say, oh, Steve is great, back when I spoke to him last in the 90s. So that's weird. I would need to kind of revive my relationship with Datavio, which will take some time and effort, and then ask him if it's OK if I reach out to Nicola, and he'll say, sure, maybe. And then I reach out to Nicola, and she may ignore me as well, because it's been 9 years since she's talked to Datavio as well. It's 2 degrees of stranger. Unless that mutual connection is someone you can send a text message to and expect a response back from, consider it not worth the time. OK, so if not that, what option are we left with? OK, let's go back to Nicola's let's go to her profile. When we click on her profile, we get this option called InMail. InMail you have to pay for. Don't pay for anything in the job search. I want you to note here, I'm a proud free member of LinkedIn, so I'm a proud basic member. LinkedIn Premium is very expensive, and I have not found a single use for which that upgrade is worthwhile, even the free one. Save that for when a useful function might be added to that. But right now, there isn't one. Everything I show you can be done for free. Everything I show you can be done with 0 connections. So if you're coming from outside the country, you've never had kind of a network growing up, don't worry about it. Being able to turn strangers into advocates on demand, that's the consummate business skill these days. So if InMail is not an option and inviting to connect, that's forward, what does that leave us with? LinkedIn groups. OK, LinkedIn groups. Scroll to the bottom of a person's profile. Click on See All. When you do that, if this option groups comes up, that means that this person belongs to groups. So let's take a look at what groups they belong to. OK, e-marketing association, that's a big group. Sports industry network, that's interesting. Duke University Alumni Network, I'm a member of that group. So that's a good reason to focus on alumni if you have multiple options. So watch this closely. Click on the group that you share with someone that you'd like to speak to or reach out to. Then click on the number of members in that group. That will bring up a directory. Type the person's name here, and Nicola's name pops up, along with a new option called Message. Click on Message, and now you're able to send Nicola a message for free. You don't need to find an email address for her. You don't even need to find a subject line for her, because it provides that for you. A fellow LinkedIn group member has sent you a message. You just need to say which group you share with her. And for those, I heard some gasps. For those of you who are weirded out by this, please do not get weirded out. It's going to get a whole lot weirder up in here before it gets better. I assure you that. I do not want to rip you off on your Friday night. So be prepared. It's going to get crazy. OK, do this as often as possible. You get 15 of these free per month. However, if you so let's say Nicola belonged to a bunch of groups, but I wasn't a member of any of them. What could I do? Join a group, yes. Yeah, within a day or two, I'd be approved. I like where your head's at. Within a day or two, I'd be approved for that group. And then there's a 4-day cooling off period before you can message members of that group. My recommendation, join a bunch of groups now before you know you need them. Because that way you can run out the clock and you don't have to wait when you're actually ready to get launched with this. Join alumni groups, join industry groups. I'm a proud member of the Harvard Business Review group. Not because I read the Harvard Business Review more than once every 3 years just to pretend I like it. But because there's almost 1 million members in that group. And that gives me access to about 1 million people who are like-minded professionals, most of whom have MBAs, and that's the space that I operate in primarily. So join groups, join them freely, join them widely. They are very powerful for getting in touch with like-minded professionals. It's also a great way to get familiar with that industry. You can lurk and see what topics they're discussing. OK, so let's say Nicola, let's say that she's the person that was quoted in Fast Company for this new initiative that TiVo's got going on, but she's not a member of any groups. That's where fan mail comes in. So I see her quoted, but there's no easy way on LinkedIn to reach out to her. Fan mail means getting people's email addresses, essentially. It's a nicer name for that. So how many of you have ever tried Googling an email address? Raise your hand. OK, with a hand gesture, tell me how well it worked. Yeah, OK, I've seen a lot of meh. The correct answer is meh. That's the official answer. And this is very much on purpose. Google doesn't share this widely, but they do not allow searches on the @ symbol. They screen it out. Deep in their FAQ, you can find out they confirm that. I assume that's to prevent spammers from harvesting email addresses off the internet, kind of like what we're about to do here ourselves. So that's fine. That's unfortunate. Thankfully, Yahoo has no such reservations. So that's the longhand way to do it, is search @tivo.com in Yahoo, and you'll see results for @tivo.com. You do that in Google, you'll just see results for TiVo. That said, I want to show you a more efficient way to do this. There's a website called Email-Format. Email-Format is ugly, but you get what you pay for, and the price is right. It is absolutely free. Type in TiVo. it will say, which TiVo are you looking for? I'm looking for TiVo.com. Click on TiVo.com, and it gives you its best guess at the email formulation for that company. I told you it was going to get weirder up in here, and we're just getting started. So it says first initial last name or first name last name. So Nicola Mattis, probably nmattis@tivo.com or nicolamattis@tivo.com. That will help you most of the time. That said, I don't want to help you most of the time. I want to help you all the time. So a good tool to use with this is called Mail Tester. So I picked this one up from a former FBI. So much fun, so much joy to share with you here today. I got this tip from a former FBI agent, not kidding. So if we type in nmattis@tivo.com and we hit check address, it's going to ping that email address to see if an email would go through to it. And we see email address doesn't exist on this server, so that's unfortunate. But I misspelled her name, so let's try nmattis with 2 T's. And then it says, oh, that email address is valid. If you send an email to it, it will go through to someone with the email address nmattis. It might go to Nicola Mattis. It might go to Nick Mattis, her husband in accounting. I like to imagine Nick is a great guy who would forward my email on to Nicola if my email is addressed to her. Again, you get what you pay for. These are all free tools. Some companies block this. You'd be amazed at the ones that do not. And I don't make the rules. I'm just playing by them. So the reason I show you this is kind of the long division by hand method. Mail Tester and email dash format have been around a long time. They are not going to go anywhere. I used to teach a tool called Reportive, which did this kind of automatically for you, but then LinkedIn acquired them and then they went away. So now I'm going to teach you a tool called Clearbit, which rose up to take that space. At some point, LinkedIn will buy them and they will go away. And a new tool will come along. But Clearbit is going to be the calculator version of this. It's the faster, more efficient version. But it may go away and it asks you for a lot of privacy. So it asks that for access to your contacts. So that's a lot of setup. Let me just show you what Clearbit is. Clearbit. OK, here's the website, Clearbit. What it is in practice, though, it's an add-in for your Gmail that works with Chrome. So let's, there we go. OK. So here we go. We got, oops. OK. When you're emailing with somebody, usually I just have, let's just look up an email with Neil. What LinkedIn or what Clearbit is when you're emailing with somebody, it brings up this let's zoom out here. What Clearbit is, it brings up this corner in your Gmail, and it will, if you're emailing with somebody, what it will do is ping their social media profiles and say, oh, this is the person you're emailing with. His name is Neil Cordes. Here's his email address. Here are links to his social media. That's great. So that's a cool use. What's really powerful about it, though, is that there's this button. So click on the Clearbit button and say Find Emails. You get 100 free searches per month, and this is a free tool. It does ask you for access to your contacts. So if you're not comfortable with that level of privacy release, email dash format and Mail Tester are going to get you most of the way there, slightly slower. I've been a member of Clearbit for over a year now. I haven't had any negative repercussions. To me, I prioritize finding employment over privacy concerns, for better and worse. It could bite me at some point in the future, but I respect if you're concerned about your privacy, email dash format will work for you. So what you do in this tool is you say, I want to find contacts at TiVo. And OK, so here, and then it says, here are all the people we have email addresses for at TiVo. So if we look up Nicola, it'll say, oh, yeah, Nicola Mattis. I told you it was going to get weirder up in here. So you click on Nicola Mattis, and it says, yes, indeed, her email address is nmattis@tivo.com. She's based in San Francisco. Here are links to her social media profiles. It's creepy stuff, man. I'm not going to lie. But if your information's out there anyway, you might as enjoy some of the benefit of it instead of just the creepy negative privacy concerns that stem from it the other direction. The reason I bring this up is the inability to turn a stranger into an advocate on demand is career limiting. At some point in your life, in your career, you will need to be able to turn strangers into advocates on demand. Maybe not to, the most common scenario would be you need to build advocacy within your current employer so that someone speaks up for you at vacation or at promotion time. So that means reaching out to strangers at your own company, turning them into advocates. However, if you get to a senior enough level, at some point you'll need to sell business, and that means finding strangers, turning them into clients, or you'll need to get knowledge from subject matter experts. So again, strangers and advocates. At some point, if you can't do this on demand, your career is limited. So Google stalking, probably not what you thought we were going to be covering in great detail today, but it's a critical life skill that I think will only become increasingly important. So that's why I wanted to make sure we covered that today. You probably haven't seen that stuff elsewhere. So I hope you enjoyed that on your Friday night. OK, So let's move ahead. Now we've got 5 contacts. We've got 2 contacts each of our top 5 employers. So we got our primary contact and a backup. We got email information for them. Now we need to write them an email. How do we do that? Well, it helps to know what the biggest frustration of the search process is. The most common frustration I hear from job seekers is people never get back to me. I email them and I never hear back. And I agree, some people will never get back to you. I call these people curmudgeons. They're awful people. They hate babies. They kick puppies. They're just the worst people ever. Or they're delightful people who have no interest in helping you find a job. Either way, it really makes no difference to you. They're ignoring you. They're not the worst segment you are going to encounter because they're at least clear about not being helpful. The worst segment you encounter is the second group, a group I call obligates. Obligates want to appear to be helpful, but they don't actually want to be helpful. They are motivated by a sense of obligation. They want to do just enough to appear to be a decent person, but not enough to actually incur the risk that is inherent in advocating for someone to get a job. So they do things like set up a meeting with you, but then cancel at the last minute. Get really weird about rescheduling. They respond to you sometimes, and when they do it, it's very slowly. So it can take a week to hear back from them, and you never know when. Obligates are dangerous because they give you a negative return on effort. They take your hope and your optimism and your effort, and they crush it. So we need a way to screen out the curmudgeons and obligates in this process so that we can focus on the third segment, the only segment that offers you a positive return on effort. And that group I call boosters. Boosters say things like, if you tell me you went to KU, you automatically get 15 minutes of my time. If they're the only segment that gives us a positive return on effort, all of our actions should be focusing on making those people happy, maximizing our response rate from those people. Unfortunately, there's no checkbox in LinkedIn that says, I'm a booster, start here. I'm a curmudgeon, don't bother. So we need a piece of information we can use as a proxy to approximate which segment a contact belongs to. My recommendation is response time. If someone gets back to you within 3 business days, I define them as a booster. It's not a life sentence. I might be a booster 9 months of the year, but during planning season, I turn into a curmudgeon during that 3 months. You don't care what they usually are. You care about the behaviors they're demonstrating right now. So if they get back to you within 3 business days, we're going to assume they're a booster. If they don't get back to us within 3 business days, we're going to assume they're an obligate or curmudgeon and take a different approach. So we'll talk more about that when we get into tracking. I want to talk about the outreach email first. The good news about boosters is they are very easy to please. They're already predisposed to be helpful. You just need to let them know you need help. So they prefer that social norm-based outreach that we talked about earlier with the couch moving experiment. You don't need to sell them on why they should talk to you. In fact, if you do that, if you try to sell them, you make it harder to get a response out of them. You risk shifting them to a market norm. So social norm-based outreach email is actually much easier to write. And once you write it once, you really don't need to do that much modifying to it. So here's the original 4-point outreach email. So thus the Duke MBA reference, because I was working on this process with one of my Duke MBAs. So read through this. Subject line, this is from an MBA job seeker, so that's why it says MBA job seeker up here. The subject line, fellow Duke MBA seeking your insight. Hi Jeff, I'm Becca, fellow Duke MBA. Can I ask you a few questions about your product management experience at Red Hat? I'm trying to learn more about product management in the North Carolina tech space, and your insights would be greatly appreciated. I call this the 4-point outreach email because there are 4 points that make it what it is. Each of these points is designed to diffuse a reason why a booster might not respond to you. What do you think one of the 4 points is?
Subject line.
What about the subject line?
Your background?
Yes, specifically the connection that you have with this person. A reason a booster might not respond is they think you're spamming them. So if you say, please reply, if that's your subject line, they're going to assume it's a spam message. So put your connection to them first. If you share a school with them, put the school first. If you share a LinkedIn group with them, put the LinkedIn group first. If you found them in a Fast Company article, mention that article first. So whatever connection you have with them, let them know that up front. First line of the email and the subject line. Thank you for that. Second point, what's another point? Anything jump out? It's short. Yeah, these are not long. So if you've been told to do outreach messages in the past, you've probably been told to make them a lot like cover letters, like 300 words, selling yourself, talking about all the value you'll add. That's problematic because the longer your outreach email is, the harder it is for someone to respond. So if you send me this message and I'm waiting in line to check out at Kroger, I can send you a 5-word response. Tell me some times you're available and feel pretty good about that. That's my good deed for the day. I got some time to kill. We're all checking our email on phones these days. If you send me that 300-word cover letter style outreach email talking about how all the great accomplishments you've had, even if I'm a booster, I might want to respond, but I don't have time to respond in the checkout line because a 5-word response to a 300-word outreach email makes me look like a pretty massive jerk. So I'm going to say, okay, I'll answer that properly when I get back to the office tomorrow. But I get back to the office tomorrow and work happens. The longer your outreach email, the higher the barrier to entry is for your contact to actually engage with you. So short emails beget short responses, which helps you more quickly and efficiently segment the market to figure out who the boosters probably are. So don't feel bad about these being short and generic. That's better than the alternative, which is long and generic. And so despite our best intentions, typically your first outreach email is very customized, but then you start copying and pasting it to within an inch of its life. I get that. Instead, just keep your outreach emails short and formulaic. Your boosters are not going to turn you down because that's just kind of how they're made. Anything else jump out? Third point. What are you asking for in this email? Conversation about what? Experience. You're asking for experience, advice, insight. What are you not asking about? Jobs. Now, realistically, anytime you send an email like this, or anytime you receive an email like this, you know that the person who sent it to you is looking for jobs. Like, you don't need to make that explicit. Nobody sends emails like this for fun. At least I hope not, because that's really messed up. Really messed up. So if you send an email like this, it's clear you're a job seeker. But to make that explicit is actually considered really awkward and rude. So for those of you who are of age, if you go to a dinner party, what do you take with you? Alcohol. You take a bottle of wine, a six-pack, something. Do you then, when you show up at the party, hand it to the host and say, I bought you this bottle of wine for free because you're cooking me dinner for free? No, probably not. I hope not. Again, I hope not. You just set it down on the counter and you go eat all their food. There's an exchange happening there, but to call explicit attention to that exchange is considered very gauche, very awkward. So good manners dictate we just put that on their counter and we go eat their food. The job search is no different. There's a code here. There are manners. But I get it. When you're in a job search, you're so terrified of wasting time and going and hitting a dead end that you want to make it super explicit. It's critical. You know I'm looking for a job search right now. But the recipient of that email considers that bad manners. They're like, whoa, I don't even know you yet. You might misconstrue if I respond to your message that I'm agreeing to help you, but I don't know you yet. So I'm just going to not respond to that. So instead, what we do is we ask about advice and insight. They know we're looking for jobs, but that's kind of the code. That's the manners that we follow here. The fourth and final point. So these emails are brief. These emails are human. These emails are egoless, so don't feel the need to sell yourself or talk about why you're so great or why they should talk to you. Rely on social norms, not market norms. No about me section. Don't attach a resume. I don't know about you. I don't know about attachments from strangers. These people will not either. Plus, it signals desperation, and that's never good. The fourth point is to be sincere. And by that I mean define your interest both narrowly and broadly. So the narrow interest, the specific interest, is your experience at Red Hat. The broad or general interest is product management in the North Carolina tech space. This is the newest point of the 4 points. This point didn't used to be around. So the original email used to look like this, just this first sentence. There was no second sentence. So what happened there, because this was developed during the financial crisis, so 2009, 2010, we were getting responses like, I'm sorry, we've got a hiring freeze at Red Hat, good luck with your search. So dead end. When we started adding this sentence, we started getting better responses. And by better, I mean like this. I'm sorry, we've got a hiring freeze at Red Hat, but I assume you're also looking at Lenovo and IBM and Bronto Software maybe. Let me know if you still want to talk. I'm happy to do so. If ever anyone says their own company is not an option but agrees to talk to you anyway, always take that call. Gives you the opportunity to earn what I call a super booster. Super boosters can be exponentially helpful because they can help you at multiple companies instead of just one, their own. I've had people who started the 2-hour job search on a Monday and landed an offer by a Friday simply because the first batch of people they reached out to included a super booster. The super booster had a friend who had their own company. That company had an opening. An informational interview on Wednesday led to a final round interview on Thursday, which led to an offer on Friday. The problem is you don't know who the super boosters are in advance. So you need to kiss a lot of frogs to find your princes in this process. It's just sort of how it works. If I could tell you who the super boosters are, this would be very easy, but then the super boosters would very quickly turn into curmudgeons because they're sick of everybody contacting them. So recognize that's the cost of doing business. We are playing probabilities in this process constantly. Okay, so those are the 4 points of the 4-point email. To me, this is the modern elevator pitch. Product management in the North Carolina tech space. This 2-minute elevator pitch, you only ever use that in interviews. The 30-second version, you only use that at cocktail parties, networking events. The ability to take the universe of all possible employers and narrow it down to a logical subset in 8 to 10 words, that to me is the modern elevator pitch. That is something you'll be using constantly. If you're targeting multiple things, you'll have multiple versions of that. That's totally fine. That might be the only thing you switch between companies that you're reaching out to. But the ability to come up with that 8-word phrase, you're going to be using that constantly. It very quickly conveys trust or conveys confidence among the people who are receiving this email. Oh yeah, A red hat absolutely makes sense if that's the genre of companies that you're interested in. And that's a great way to start the conversation. Okay, so let's do a little practice. Do you guys like helping friends in need? Maybe? Yeah, okay, I see, yes. Okay, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Because we've got a friend, we'll call him Mitch. Your friend Mitch is interested in operations and the company Method. So the company Method, they're the ones who make the soap products. So here's an article he found in Fast Company. Mitch unfortunately made a bad life decision. He went to a different school. So he's not attending the session that you're all attending right now. So he saw this article, perfect for fan mail. So he's asked for your help to help him write an email to this company. So he asked for your help. How do you write a good subject line? Have you guys written subject lines to emails before? Yeah, a few times probably. So the exercise right now, so this article, if you peruse it, you see it's about the VP of operations at Method Home is the name of the formal name of the company. So Gary Ebbleton, he's their VP of operations. He's talking about the sustainable factory that he made for Method. So what I want you to do is peruse this article. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to draft a subject line for it for your friend Gary, or for your friend Mitch, who's reaching out to Gary to do an informational meeting. So take 30 seconds, dash out a quick subject line. Do that right now. I'll give you 30 seconds. Go. Don't overthink it. Write it down, and then we'll share with a partner shortly. Okay, that's time. Find a partner, turn to your neighbor, and share with them what your subject line was. You have 1 minute. Go. Okay, that's time. Whose partner had a good subject line? Did anyone's partner do well here? Yes?
Neat soap.
Need soap?
Neat soap.
Neat soap. N-E-A-T?
Yes, just like, I like your soap, and they're like, yeah, I'd really like to talk about it, because no one wants to talk to me about this kind of stuff.
So the subject line would be neat soap. What did you like about that?
Well, the explanations are that there's a compliment built into it.
Okay. So neat soap, there's a compliment built out into I like getting compliments.
There's an invitation to talk more.
Okay, excellent. So what's a way we can make that one a little bit better? A sentence? Like what would you include in that sentence?
I like what you do with my soap.
Maybe a little bit more specific. Thank you for that. I think we're on the right track. Compliments, flattery is very effective. We'll get into that a little bit further. Anyone else have a good subject line that their partner came up with? Nominate them before they nominate you. Yes, excellent. Thank you for volunteering. What's your subject line?
Well, I didn't know what the connection would be, but basically something interested in like the thought process behind this, like why the person decided to do that way.
Okay, so if we put words to that, but I think did anybody in their subject line mention the Fast Company article? See some nodding. That's the gold mine here. There's a Fast Company article. The only thing people like talking more about than themselves is their media appearances. So your Fast Company article would be a totally acceptable subject line for this. Your sustainability work according to Fast Company. Okay, now you're mentioning some flattering news about them, like, okay, they appeared in this article, and you're mentioning a sincere interest in their work. The key here is don't overthink this. The way that you lose at this game is you spend 5 hours thinking about it. I saw a lot of you stare at the screen for 30 seconds. That's the way you lose at this process. You need to adapt to the 80-20 rule. You've written tons of subject lines before. Who is our target audience? What segment? It's not obligates, it's not curmudgeons, it's boosters, yes. They are not judging you arbitrarily hard. They are going to be receptive to talking to you. Just don't take 5 hours to do this. Spend 30 seconds. They are the ones who are not going to turn you down, and they're going to love the chance to talk about their media appearance. So that's the big takeaway from this exercise. Don't stress. Okay, let's try it again. So your friend Mitch, he's got a great subject line, your sustainability work method according to Fast Company. Great, we'll work with that. Now he wants your help actually drafting the message. So what I want you to do is take a couple minutes, draft a quick email. Again, it's not even for you, it's for your friend Mitch, and he made a bad life decision by going to a different school. So don't feel too bad for him. Do your best in a couple minutes. You know the drill. Take 2 minutes, draft a quick outreach email using the 4-point email framework, and then we'll share with partners, and then we'll discuss as a group. As a reminder, here are the 4 points of the 4-point email. So keep it short, put the connection first, seek advice, insight, not jobs, and define your interest narrowly and broadly. Go. Okay, that's time. Share with a partner what your email is. Go. You've got 2 minutes. Okay, let's bring it back to the front. Anyone's partner do a good job here? I recognize I gave you a ton of time to work on this, but again, this is for Mitch. We don't care about Mitch. Bad life decision. Did anybody's partner come up with a decent email? You've written emails before, correct? Has this happened to you before? There's these things, emails, they, yeah. Yes?
Mine did.
Yes, tell us more. Thank you for volunteering.
You want to just read it?
Yes, please.
So she said, hey Gary, I'm Mitch. After reading the Lead Thinking Factory Act article, my interest was piqued regarding the sustainability of manufacturing. Your knowledge of this topic would be greatly appreciated. Sincerely, Mitch.
What did you like about that?
Straight to the point. You know, she didn't waste the time saying, hey, this is what I do. She just got on straight to the point.
What do you all think? I see some nods. I think it's pretty good. I would say very nice work for 2 minutes of effort. Thank you very much for that. That's spot on. The key here is be human. My colleague calls it DBW, don't be weird. So you have a very genuine sentiment. Like Mitch is passionate about operations. He wants to work for Method. Like just capture that honesty. Honestly, don't sell yourself. You're not trying to score points. Just say, you do really interesting work. Tell me why you're so good at your job. That's really all we're trying to get across here. Again, the way that you lose is you don't write anything down, or you spend 5 hours agonizing over exactly what words to use. And should I say marketing or professional or leadership? Like, don't worry about that. Our target audience is boosters, and they're not going to judge you that hard. So really nice job. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for volunteering her. Great work. OK. So let's dive on in. Here are a couple other variations on the same theme. Let's say that you have a job posting in mind. I mentioned putting that in your outreach email. It diffuses yet another reason why a booster might not respond. They don't know how to help you. So here's how that would look. I'm Adrian, a Master of Finance student at a different school. Can I have a few minutes to ask you about your experience as a fellow Master of Finance graduate at Inspire Learning? Your insights will be appreciated as I'm now in the process of applying for a business development manager position there. What I like about that is you're saying, even if you just talk to me and share some insight, you've done your good deed for the day. You don't have to look around on my behalf. I've already done that legwork. So all I'm looking for is advice. That said, if they like you, they can offer to advocate for you further. So it's a nice way to put that on the table and add some urgency to your message. At some point in your career, you'll be reaching out to younger people. So let's say that you find somebody who's junior to you at a company you want to work for. So quick quiz, it's a LinkedIn group message. What's a good subject line for this email? Good subject line for a LinkedIn message, group message? Or is it a trick question? It's absolutely a trick question. There are no subject lines for group messages. That's one of the reasons why LinkedIn group messages are so awesome. They save you work. So no, there's no subject line. You save yourself that effort. But here's how that email might look. Hi, Jen. My name's Jane Ray. I'm a fellow member of the LinkedIn Sports Apparel Group. Can I have a few minutes to ask you about your experience at Reebok? I've spent the last few years in finance at Nike, and I'm now seeking to return to Boston to be closer to family. So same format, same guts, but a little less deferential when you're reaching out to people junior to you. You guys aren't there yet, but just understand this is a very durable framework. It's more of a starter framework rather than something that's perfect. Just get comfortable coming up with iterations and see what works best for you. OK. So that's the 4-point outreach email. Let's talk about tracking now, because with a 40% response rate, and we're going to be targeting 5 people at once, so one person at 5 different companies, with a 40% response rate, if we email 5 people on the same day, we'll hear back from 2 of them. That means 3 of them we're going to need to follow up on. That means that we're going to need a system for tracking all of this outreach. This is the molecular formula for cortisol. Does anyone know what cortisol is? Stress hormone. OK, correct. What are some of the effects of cortisol commonly associated with it? Belly fat, yes, yeah. Weight gain, that's all kind of bad, yeah. Other effects of it? Typically the ones I hear are all bad. So hair loss, weight gain, high blood pressure, predisposition to disease. Like people are hating on cortisol, something fierce. But we have it for a reason. Like it didn't evolve by accident. So let's go back a few thousands of years and let's bring a bear into the room. Let's say that you had to fight the bear. Your brain would flood with adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline gives you temporary superhuman strength to help you fight the bear. Cortisol lowers your inhibitions. So it helps you overlook any previous instances of fighting bears that you had that didn't go well to help you gear up for the present fight. And either you win and you go back to eating and sleeping and procreating, or you lose and you don't have to worry about much of anything. So cortisol is great, but it's designed for short-term use. So perfect for fighting bears, terrible when you're trying to be a responsible adult in a job search, because the way that it works is it makes you forgetful. And the quickest way to lose boosters in this process is to say you're going to do something and not do that thing. So cortisol, it's used for short-term use. Unfortunately, in modern society, we live with elevated levels of stress all the time. So that's why the weight gain, the hair loss, the predisposition to disease. So it's critical to note that this is not on you. Your body is fighting you neurochemically in this process. It's trying to prevent you from being a responsible adult in this process. That's not your fault, but you do have to account for it. Now, did anyone have coffee today? Delicious coffee. Actually, coffee's terrible. I hate it, but I drink it like a functional beverage. It is red medicine to me. Sadly, caffeine, like that in coffee, is also produces cortisol in the brain. And stress and caffeine are basically the school diet. So the more of each you consume, the more forgetful you become, the more mistakes you make, and that's the quickest way to lose all of the networking help that you've earned along the way. So critical to note, Your body is fighting you and your brain's been compromised. You can't afford to rely on your own memory because it's just not working right now. So you need to outsource your memory function to something that doesn't make mistakes. That means a computer. So your Google Calendar, your Outlook calendar, whatever you prefer, you got to use something. So that's where the 3B7 routine comes in, because with a 40% response rate, we're going to have to follow up on a bunch of people here. So 3B7, B is for business days. So all of this work that you're going to be doing in terms of tracking people is going to be on business days, so you have weekends off. 3 and 7 are the 2 durations of time you wait to take further action when you email somebody for the first time. So this process has one rule. When you email somebody for the first time, you set 2 reminders on them, one for 3 business days later and one for 7 business days later. Now the so let's say we email our 5 contacts, our favorite contact, each of our top 5 from our lamp list on Monday. 7 business days later is going to be Wednesday. That's our signal to follow up on the original contact. Anyone we haven't heard from yet, we send a follow-up email. My recommendation is for the original email. Say I'm following up on my email from last week. I want to know if now is a better time to talk. Please let me know if so. Keep it simple. Imagine it's a voicemail and type that. My colleague Malcolm, he has a different approach. He pretends the first email didn't exist, and he just sends it exactly the same way again. It's more efficient. He wants to minimize embarrassment. I'm more concerned about avoiding fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error refers to the phenomena where human beings, just our nature, when things go well, we attribute it to our own skills and virtues. But when things go poorly, it's human nature to attribute it to the faults and shortcomings of others. So if you email somebody once and then you ghost on them, this could have been an obligate or a curmudgeon who had no interest in engaging with you. This is your dream company, though, so you're going to keep networking until you get an interview. It's possible this obligate shows up in your interview process. It's very easy, if you email them once and disappear, for them to blame you for being a flighty millennial who doesn't commit to things. However, if you email them once and follow up on them once, they can't blame you like that anymore. They have to own up, okay, you did the right thing. You tried me once, you followed up, and then you went away. That's perfect. You have my respect. You didn't have my advocacy, but you have my respect. That's what I'm going for here. What's the 3 business day reminder, though, for? What's that for? Where have we talked about 3 business days before? Booster, yes. That's how we define boosters. People who get back to us within 3 business days are probably on our side. People who take longer than that are probably not. So the 3 business day reminder, that's our signal to try a different contact. That's how the 3B7 system works. So you email 5 people on Monday, and then you promptly forget about them. They are not even human beings. They are lottery tickets with 40% odds of success. So don't dwell on all the failure of this process, because there's going to be a ton of it. Don't dwell on the rejections. We are playing the probabilities in this process. When the 3 business day reminder pops up, for anyone that you haven't heard back from yet, we're going to try a second contact. And because we're reaching out to a new person for the first time, what do we make sure we do? The one rule of this process? When you email somebody for the first time, you do what? Nope. All of these are correct answers. However, it's not the one I'm going for. The one rule of this process is anytime you email somebody for the first time, you set 2 reminders on them. One for 3 business days later and one for 7 business days later. So very quickly, you're going to be extrapolating. The number of people you're going to have in play simultaneously will dramatically grow very quickly with a 40% response rate. So you're going to email a different contact and set 3 and 7 business day reminders on them. And if that person doesn't get back to you when that 3 business day reminder pops up, we try a 3rd person and then a 4th. The only time you give up on a company is when you either have run out of people or when you decide you no longer like that company based on all the people that have ignored you so far. When your motivation changes, that's an okay time to walk away. But for most of you, you're going to keep going because these are going to be big brand name companies for the most part that you're going to be targeting. So that's why we start with highly motivated companies, because we may get rejected and ignored a few times before we get a response. Okay, so in this process, we're going to approach 5 employers simultaneously, 1 contact at a time. So multiple employers simultaneously, but 1 contact at a time within each company until they give us a reason to believe they're not a booster. Then we'll try somebody else. Because it's very unlikely that if someone hasn't responded within the first 3 business days, it's very unlikely they're going to get back to us in the next week. We don't need to wait around a whole week and a half to get ignored by someone we're pretty sure is not going to get back to us. What I want you to avoid is not having any process at all. If you don't have any process at all, what happens is you email somebody. You don't hear back from them for a week. You figure, you should follow up, but you don't know how, and isn't that awkward? I'm just going to be reminding them they didn't get back to me. I can't deal with this right now. I've got a quiz to study for. I'll do that. I'll deal with this tomorrow. Tomorrow comes around. You still haven't heard back from them. You have the same exact debate. Stress yourself out. Do something else. Next night, stress yourself out. Do something else. For 3 weeks, you'll be doing that, and the whole time it could have been a curmudgeon who had no intention of ever getting back to you. You just stressed yourself out for no reason. So pick a routine that you believe in and stick to it. Turn your brain off. Don't fall in love with any of these people in advance. Wait until they get back to you within 3 business days, and then you can fall in love with them. But not before. They are lottery tickets. They are not people. So having a process reduces your anxiety. You're not figuring out, should I follow up with somebody, should I not? You're following rules. My recommendation is put a fake 7 a.m. appointment in your Google Calendar or Outlook calendar. That way you have the whole day to act. But it only takes away your decision anxiety if you follow it with 100% precision. It's got to be airtight. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to remember, did I follow up with that person or did I take that day off and figure out to do it tomorrow? You can't make exceptions. Otherwise, the decision anxiety comes rushing back. The benefit of this process, you have weekends off. And there will be plenty of days where you do not have any reminders that pop up. So you have the day off. Go see a movie. Hang out with a loved one. Hit the bars early. You know, like whatever you're into, do that thing. But it's important to keep your sanity in this process. If you dwell on the rejection, you will go insane. 80% of us feel the imposter effect. The imposter effect refers to the phenomena where 80% of us have at one time or another felt concerned that other people are going to figure out that we're not as good as they think we are right now. That's a universal source of anxiety. A lot of us feel that way. You'll feel pressure. I'm not doing enough. I need to do an off-campus job search. I should email 10 companies instead of just 5 because I'm that committed. I've never seen someone be successful using 3B7 starting with more than 5 employers at once. Thousands of iterations. I've never seen anyone pull it off. So start with 5. If you're getting comfortable with setting reminders and you feel like the workload isn't too heavy, feel free to introduce a 6th one simultaneously and then a 7th. But don't start with more than 5 because it's possible you get a 100% response rate. You email 5 people, all 5 of them agree to talk to you. That's going to be challenging to schedule within the next week. If you do 10 people, you could go 10 for 10, and then you're going to have to let some people go because you just don't have the bandwidth. So start with 5 and work your way up when you get more comfortable with this process. And don't blame yourself. Don't feel bad. If you're reaching out to 5 employers simultaneously, you are doing everything that could be reasonably expected of you. It takes about a month to find an advocate at a company. So if you find 5 advocates before the turn of the year, I think you've done a great job. And you've made sure you've aimed that effort at the right 5 employers, the 5 that you're most fired up about. Okay, so let's recap this section. Big takeaways. Pick contacts that have the job you want plus 5 or 10 years and that are easy to find. If they're not easy to find a new contact. Don't try to squeeze blood from a stone. Secondly, target boosters, but expect a lot of obligates and curmudgeons along the way. You are going to have to kiss many frogs to find your princes, but the princes are worth it. Finally, don't fall in love with anyone in advance. Treat this process probabilistically. These are coin flips, and we're gonna keep going until we win that coin flip. The result of this will be an informational meeting that we have on the calendar, and that's what we're going to wrap up today talking about. Quick quiz question. Your 3B reminder pops up on an unresponsive contact. Let's say we emailed Nicola at TiVo, and we didn't hear back from her. Our 3 business day reminder pops up. What 3 things do we do? Email someone else. That's 1. And what's the 1 rule of the process? Anytime you email somebody for the first time, what do you do? 3 and 7 business day reminders. Yes, absolutely. So those are the 3 things you do. That's the 1 rule of the process. Great job. Okay, recruiting advocacy. That's the last step of this process. So emergency, I'm choking. What do you do? Watch me choke. What do you do? Heimlich. Yes, Heimlich maneuver. Just really basically, how do you do that? Yeah, okay, yeah. You do that thing with the fists and the chest and you beat on people's chest until the thing that they're choking on pops out. Thank you for saving my life. I had one group recently that said, call 911. No, I would die. I would literally die. So don't do that. No, Heimlich is absolutely correct. Okay, the Heimlich maneuver. Are you confused when you think about the Heimlich maneuver? No, you kind of know. It's beautiful in its simplicity. You know, you just do that thing with the arms and yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a different topic, informational meetings. Are you confused or anxious about those? Do you know exactly what to do? These are a little trickier. So wouldn't it be nice if there was a Heimlich maneuver for informational meetings? That's what I do. So I'm going to walk you through something called the Tiara framework, which is my Heimlich maneuver for informational meetings, because informational meetings baffle me. But they're actually surprisingly predictable. So when you know what the rhythm is, they're actually pretty easy to optimize. So the Tiara framework, in a nutshell, relies on a couple concepts. First, don't sell yourself. Revisiting what we started this conversation off with. Nobody likes being sold to. When you sense a sales pitch, your guard goes up. Success in this process means bringing people's guards down systematically. This whole sell yourself mentality, it's outdated and it's counterproductive. Again, if you're good at it, do it. Keep doing you. I'm not good at it though, so I need an alternative. What's the alternative? It's to be likable. Olivia Fox-Cabaño, she's a lecturer at Stanford, wrote a wonderful book called The Charisma Myth. Her research showed that the single biggest predictor of charisma or likability is not anything that you say. It's in fact how well you're perceived to be listening. So she did this study where she had people have a phone conversation, and one of the partners she would cognitively load, make them surf the internet or do an easy puzzle while they're talking. And then they had the other partner in the conversation rate the likability of their conversation partner. And they found that people who were cognitively loaded were considered to be less likable than the ones who were not. And she measured and found that the difference between those two audiences is that the people who were loaded, who had a task to do, their responses to prompts came a fraction of a second slower than people who were not cognitively loaded. So people couldn't detect that there was a delay in the response, but they could detect, like, this person doesn't seem like they're listening. They seem less likable. So it's critical that you are fully absorbed in the conversations that you have with these people. How many of you have dogs or have had dogs in the past? Oh, dogs are awesome. Do we love our dogs because they're good conversationalists? No, we love them because when they look at us, we are the only person in the world to them. This happens. Oh, dog hugs are just the best thing ever. So dogs, dogs are very, very good at detecting human emotions. This is not by accident. Dogs used to be wolves. So thousands of years ago, they figured out, wow, we could keep killing things and hunting and all that, or we could just hang out next to these humans because they like to give us food. So over time, the wolves that became dogs, their features became more elven. They became very, very well attuned to human emotions. So that's why dogs will know we're in a bad mood often before we will ourselves. So dogs are just incredibly attentive. They're wonderful. So in informational meetings, big takeaway here, I want you to be that dog. I don't want you to be focusing on scoring points or selling yourself. I want you to be singularly focused on the person who's sharing their time with you. Their hourly billing rate is so much higher than yours. Take advantage. Any moment you can get them to speak and tell you why they're good at your job, you are earning money effectively. You are earning money for free. Let them show off how smart they are at their jobs. Be the dog in the informational meeting. That's the big takeaway here. So the Tiara framework, it hinges on the fact that informationals are incredibly predictable. Strangers are very, very predictable. So 3 basic elements in any informational meeting. Small talk at the beginning, Q&A in the middle, and next steps at the end. We're going to break each one of these down for a few minutes, and then we'll wrap up. The key information you're seeking here. What do you think the key piece of information, I know you're seeking a job, but what do you think is the key piece of information you're seeking out of this informational? Your ideal scenario. Your key piece of information you get is what? Another connection. It's a referral. Absolutely correct. Very well done. Thank you for that. Referral. It's a referral to someone who knows more about jobs because referrals are the single best way to get interviews. If you get a referral, chances are you're going to get an interview. So make no mistake, everything I'm here talking about, we're going to be asking about advice and insight and information, but the goal is to get a referral. If you don't get a referral in the conversation, you are going to follow up with that person after the conversation to try to get a referral. That's the goal here. Make no mistake about that. Okay, so how do we maximize the chance that we get a referral out of this conversation? Well, we have to honor the dance that we have to do with informational. So small talk always comes first. A common mistake job seekers make is they skip over small talk and they just start asking for advice. Problem is you haven't built any likability. This person doesn't know if they trust you. So they're just going to give you a blow-off answer. Like, keep doing what you're doing and something's going to turn up. So we need to honor the fact that small talk happens first, and it's critically important. Why? Because it's something called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias refers to the phenomena where people make first impressions very, very quickly. And once we make a first impression, we hate overriding that first impression. We will selectively pick out information that supports that first impression and ignore information that does not support it or conflicts with it. So if I like you initially, I'm going to cherry pick further reasons from my interactions with you to continue liking you. It's going to take a lot of data for me to decide, wait, I was wrong. I don't like you at all. On the flip side, if I don't like you initially, if I think you're awkward to interact with, it's going to take a lot of data to the contrary to convince me, wait, no, actually I do kind of like you. You're a decent guy. So because small talk happens first, it's critical that you take it seriously and do it well. Thankfully, there's a mutual incentive in informational meetings. Your contact wants to have an awkward conversation with you about as much as you want to have an awkward conversation with them. So you're on the same team here. Knowing that, that allows us to operationalize our small talk a little bit. So if you are good at small talk and it's always come naturally to you, you do you. Know that I'm incredibly jelly. I've never been that. I've never been that person. Small talk has always been foreign to me. So of course, I have an algorithm for managing small talk. So here's my algorithm. 3 questions. First, how's your day going so far? I'm looking for a very specific piece of information with this question. It's a temperature check question. I want to know, is this contact chatty or are they all business? First rule of facilitation, and what we're doing here is facilitating a professional conversation. First rule of facilitation is follow the energy. So if you get a spike in energy based on your question, you're doing something well, keep doing that. If you don't get any energy, you try a different approach. So if I ask, how's your day going so far, and this happens, fine. And yours? Fine. And I move on to the next question because there's no energy there. However, if I get a more engaged answer like this, how's your day going so far? Oh, it's been crazy. My dog got sick. I had to race into work to get here on time this morning, but I'm happy we're able to talk. What would be a good follow-up question? What's that? Yeah, how's your dog? I had another group that said, what kind of dog do you have? No, that's a bad question. People love their dogs. Sick dog was the important fact there, not just dog. So by having an algorithm, it helps you pick out the most relevant piece of information. And there's a right answer on that one. There's definitely a right answer and a wrong answer. Basically, the rule of thumb, if you're not comfortable with small talk or it's foreign to you, ask this basic temperature check question. If they give you any extraneous information above and beyond what was necessary to answer a very simple question, it's a signal they're trying to help you out. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously. Basic small talk means ask a follow-up question on that thing. So if they say, how was your day so far? Oh, I'm a little bit tired. I was up late watching the Cubs pull that big victory out. A good question would be, have you been a Cubs fan long? Are you from Chicago? Any series of questions about baseball. Or I haven't been following it. Who's playing? Show you're listening. That's the way that you build likability in this process. Even if you're not a sports fan, don't understand it. Engage them on the topic they brought up. It's a signal they're trying to help you. Maybe not consciously, maybe subconsciously to avoid awkwardness. But ask a follow-up question on the extraneous information they gave you. That's going to be a consistent theme. Second question, when the energy starts to die there, if it starts to die, the second question I would go to would be, how did you join your organization? I want you to ask them about themselves before they have a chance to do that to you, because I want you to mirror their behavior. It's a very easy route to likability. So if they take 30 seconds to answer that question and they're all business, and they ask you about yourself, I want you to take 30 seconds and be all business. If they take 2 minutes and they're chatty, I want you to take 2 minutes and be chatty. If they take 5 minutes and they're chatty, you still just take 2 minutes and be chatty. 2 minutes max for you. They're the star of the show. We want to get the focus back onto them, because while they're talking, you're building likability more predictably. Third question, once the likability or once the energy starts to taper there, is what are you working on right now? So if someone's not been really engaging in the small talk yet, it's probably because they have work on their mind. This is a chance for you to express a genuine interest in the work that they do. And it gives them a chance to talk about what's really on their mind. So if they're stressed out about a project, they'll bring it up here in as much detail as they can. One of these 3 questions, almost without fail, will get somebody to increase their level of energy to maximize the chance that when we start the Q&A portion, we get usable information, and that's critical. So take small talk seriously, because it sets the anchor for you or against you. And once that anchor is set, it's really hard to overcome it in the other direction and, to make it positive. Okay, so the Tiara framework gets its name from the algorithm I recommend for the Q&A portion in the middle of the conversation. The second common mistake job seekers make: first, they skip small talk. Second, they do small talk, but then they dive right in and ask for advice. Problem with that approach is, while this person likes you, they haven't been primed to think creatively. So the advice you're going to get is going to be pretty obvious. Oh, keep talking to people. Check our website, and let me know if you find a job posting. So what we want to do is prime them to think creatively before we start asking for advice. The best way to do that is to portray them as an expert in their field before we start portraying them as a mentor. So the ethos behind this: let's start off portraying them as a mentor, ask them why they're so good at their job, and then we'll ask them some mentorship style questions like advice. So Tiara, because everything needs an acronym, I'm a former strategy consultant. It's got to have an acronym. T is for, actually, the one common theme of all the questions that we're going to be asking in this informational is going to be that they are fun and flattering to answer. So a common question that people love to use in informationals that I absolutely hate is, what's the corporate culture like at your company? What's a way that we can change that same question to make it more fun and flattering to answer? Yes? What's it like to work at your company? I don't think we're quite there yet. I don't think that's really fun or flattering. How else could we change it? Yes?
What's your most favorite part of your job?
Yes, what's your favorite part of the corporate culture? That would be a great way. That's fun and flattering. It's flattering because they're going to pick something that's positive about their company. They're not going to pick something they hate. So they can talk about something they like. And it's fun because it forces them to take a stand. Pick one thing. There are lots of things you like. Pick the one that is your favorite. So asking for superlatives, that's going to be an easy way to engage people creatively. You're essentially asking them, why are you so good at your job? No one wants to give you a bad or half-assed answer to that. So they're going to actually think creatively to come up with the right answer to that. That's important, because when we ask for advice, we want them to be thinking creatively. Okay, so trend questions. The consummate trend question is, what trend is most impacting your business right now? This seems basic, but it will get more sophisticated with time. So if you ask a marketer, what trend is most impacting your business right now? If I talk to Kraft on Monday, ask that question, they say, well, the fluctuating price in oil is making us overhaul our distribution to save on fuel costs. On Wednesday, when I do an informational with General Mills, I can ask the same question, but in a smarter way. In my research, I know that the fluctuating price in oil is making marketers overhaul their distribution to save on fuel costs. Are you seeing a similar trend, or is another trend impacting you more seriously? It's letting them know I've done some homework. I've gotten stuff that's not just on the internet. I've talked to people who are kept up at night by this kind of work. I want more information like that that's going to make me smarter at this job. It's going to make me better in interviews because I'm really going to understand what their pain points are. So these will get more sophisticated with time. The key here is you want to keep these questions going. So you don't want to have a list of 5 questions for each of these topics and just run through that list of questions, because then that implies you're not listening. So you need to become very good at asking follow-up questions. So if you don't have a natural follow-up question, I want you to have a bank of phrases that you can use to keep the answer going. Oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more. Oh, can you go into more detail on that? Phrases like that to help buy you time so you can ask a logical follow-up question to show that you're really listening. Because that's the route to likability. That's the route to referrals in these conversations. It's not taking them through a list of questions. It's by demonstrating you're really listening to the answers that they're giving you. Make sense? Okay. So trend questions are very macro in nature. A good way to switch these up a little bit, try to see what works best for you, is to time shift them. How has this business changed most since you started? That would be an example of a past trend question. Or how do you predict this business will be most different 5 years from now? These are questions where if you ask 10 people, you'll get 10 different answers, and all of them are correct. And you might be the only person who asked this person, like, why are you so smart at your job this year? And that goes a long way. People really like getting that question. So don't feel bad about asking reusable questions. The worst thing you can do is stump the recruiter. Because if you ask them a question about a trend that you identified and ask them to react to that, or a product that they didn't know their company made, they're not going to blame themselves for lack of knowledge, even if they should know, because of fundamental attribution error. They're going to blame you for asking them an awkward question that killed the conversation. So stay safe. Ask questions that are reusable, that don't take a ton of prep time. Good news is you can do TR on short notice, even with no prep time. Okay. Once we've asked them about the macro environment, let's get a little more personal. So insight questions are a natural follow-on to trends. Insight questions, what's been your best professional decision so far and why? What surprises you most about this job? If you've been at this company for 10 years, if you had to attribute your success to one skill or trait, what would it be? Is that trait common across the organization, or is it unique to you? Why are you so good at your job, essentially? So ask them a little bit more personal questions to build some likability and prime creativity before we start asking them for advice, which comes next. So advice questions, I recommend making them the hero in your story. They are the protagonist. So instead of asking them, what should I be doing right now to best prepare for a career in this field? I recommend asking them, if you were me, what would you be doing right now to best prepare for a career in this field? People think harder for themselves than they think for others. So make them the hero. Make them remember the pain of being in a job search. To explicitly ask for empathy. What would they do if they were you? Another example, if I wanted to learn how to speak like someone who's had this job for 3 years before I even start, how would you go about doing that if you were me? Knowing what you know now, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were in my position trying to break into this field? Those are advice questions. In the book, I have a list of them. You can check the book out of the library. So if you don't write them all down, that's a great place to find them. This is all lead up to the pivot question of the conversation. The pivot question is the first question in the resources category. The pivot question is this: what resources do you recommend I look into next? The word resources is vague on purpose, because what ideally are we looking for here? Referral. However, a problem with referrals is if you ask for them explicitly and you get shot down, you can't ask for referrals again. You only get to do that once. So what we want to do is create a safe space for people to share referrals with us if they're comfortable doing that, but we don't want to put them on the spot in the process. If you asked me, for example, and most people I would say, who should I talk to next? I'm not going to give you a referral until I ask my referral that that's okay to do first. I'm not going to throw my referral under the bus. So I'll say, oh, I'm sorry, nobody comes to mind, but I'll let you know if that changes. And now you can't prompt me for that information anymore. However, some people have made that referral recently. Some people are just very open with their networks. You want to give them a safe space to offer that information. So they will interpret resources as people. However, if people are not comfortable giving you a referral, they'll ask you a clarifying question like this: what sort of resources are you looking for? To me, that's a signal you're not going to get a referral today. That's fine. I would ask them for literal resources. What's the most important 10 minutes of research you do in a given day to stay current on your industry? Do you have any podcasts that you like that you find helpful for staying up to date on trends in the space? What LinkedIn groups do you find particularly helpful for staying current? So literal resources that will help you get smarter at the space that you're trying to break into. So if they give you a referral, that's great. If you want to get a job at our company, you got to talk to Wenny. She's the hiring captain for KU. Go talk to her next. Great. You can wrap the conversation up there. Say, thank you very much. I will reach out to Wenny right away, and I'll update you in a couple weeks to let you know what happens. If they ask you what kind of resources you're looking for, ask for resources, and then finish up with any time remaining asking about assignments or projects. What projects have you done that have been most impactful for the company? Have you had interns in the past? If so, what sort of projects have they done that were most impactful for the company? What kind of project do you recommend for a brand new employee to best get the understanding of this field if you were doing it all over again? So this builds your mental toolbox of specific projects you would do if you were hired to do this job by a company. That makes you a much more credible candidate. It makes your cover letters easier to write. It makes why this space an easier interview question to answer. Lots of good stuff happens when you can rattle off 3 or 4 projects that are common in that space. So use your informationals to do that. Okay. And as a reminder, flattering and fun to answer. That's the common theme of all these questions. Any questions about the Q&A portion before we do next steps? Yes?
Yeah, so with the resource part of that, if they do give you a referral, would it be a good idea to go ahead and ask them for the contact information, or do you just go ahead and find out on your own?
That's a really good question. So the question for those of you who couldn't hear, is it a good idea to ask them for contact information? Generally, when people offer referrals, they'll give you some kind of indication. Like, let me make that referral, let me make that connection for you. My recommendation is always try to own the next step, because you're more motivated to make that referral happen than they are. So if they say, oh, let me connect you to my coworker, I would say, I'm happy to do that outreach and copy you on it. Would you prefer that? Let me take an item off your plate. And then they'll give you contact information to make that happen. That said, usually they'll give you an indication for what to do next. But if you truly have no clue, you should be able to Google stalk pretty effectively to find their contact information, which I think is kind of a baller move. But if you try that and you get stuck, feel free to reach back out and say, I tried to find contact information, but I was unsuccessful. Please let me know if you have an email address for them. But generally, you're going to be able to find contact information. The technology is too good right now. Anyone who's 5 to 10 years senior to you is presented at a conference. Their contact information's out there somewhere. So they have to expect that it's easy to find. Good question, though. Thank you for that. Any other questions about Tiara? Yes?
You did say a lot of these questions are in the book.
Yes. Yes. So feel free to use that as a reference. Again, don't have 5 questions for each of these topics. Just have one good one. And if one seems to not be working for you, try swapping in a new one. This is a very iterative process, so you'll find what works best for your style. Certain questions will give you better results. OK, so let's wrap up with next steps. Either you get a contact in this informational or you don't. So the next steps determine how we close this conversation just depends on whether we got a referral or not. I'm going to assume in most cases you're not going to get a referral. When you ask for resources, they're going to ask what resources are you looking for. OK, so we need to go back for a referral later. Here's how I'd recommend closing the conversation. Thank you so much. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm going to take the weekend to reflect. Is it OK if I reach back out to you with any further questions? To which they'll answer, yes, because to say no, they'd have to be kind of a massive jerk. So we're going to we're actually using a behavioral science concept called commitment and consistency, identified by Robert Cialdini. He found that if you get people to say yes, they're going to do something, even if it's something they don't want to do, that makes them far more likely to actually do that thing when put to the test. So by getting them to say yes, it's OK if you ask additional questions, you maximize the chance that when you follow up a week later to get more information, and specifically your follow-up email would look like this. Upon further reflection, this is definitely something I would like to pursue further. How would you go about doing that if you were me? For example, can you recommend someone I should speak to next? This is your one time to ask for a referral explicitly, by email a week after the conversation. By this point, they've had nothing but positive touch points with you. You asked for an informational, asking for advice and insight. You did the informational and asked for information and insight, not jobs. You sent a thank you note that should go without saying within 24 to 48 hours after the conversation. That would be by email, not handwritten. That's too expensive, takes too much time, too much effort. Email gets the job done. And then you followed up a week later and asked for a contact. If they don't give you a referral now, they're never going to give you a referral. And that's fine. Some people will not give you a referral. But even an obligate at this point, if they couldn't find a nice way to get out of the conversation with you, they will feel bad if they leave you empty-handed. And their whole motivation is to not have to look at themselves as being a bad person. So if you follow up with them a week after the conversation and say, how would you go about doing this if you were me? They'd be like, man, that person's going to reach back out and they did everything right. And, OK, I got to give them something. I'll fire them off to HR and get them out of my hair. The funny thing is HR is not going to ask this obligate, are you really recommending this person or are you just trying to get them out of your hair? They're going to assume it's a warm referral, which can be enough to get you an interview. So that's how you manage benefit from obligates. Even though they're not your target audience, you can still get benefit from them if they can't find a way to get off of this process. You're going to manage this process so that they have a really hard time finding an off-ramp. And that's to your advantage. Make sure you set that reminder in your calendar, though. It's very easy to forget to follow up to get the referral, and that is the goal of this process. If you don't get the referral in the conversation, you've got to follow up for it. Once they give you a referral, it's as if they gave it to you in the conversation itself. Thank you very much. I'll follow up with you in a couple weeks to let you know what happens after I reach out to Lenny. Set a reminder for a couple weeks later. After you reach out to Wendy right away. This reminder will pop up in 2 weeks. The benefit of this, quick way to lose a booster is to take their help and never speak to them again. They feel totally used, so don't do that. Set a reminder in your calendar to let them know, give them an update. Secondly, this gives you a graceful way to update your booster that you didn't flake if Wendy doesn't get back to you. So if the referral does not get back to you, you want a nice way to be able to tell them it's not my fault, I did the right thing. So you can send them an email like this. As promised, I wanted to send you an update. Unfortunately, Wendy and I have not been able to connect. How would you like for me to proceed from here? Now, they may offer to reach out to Wendy on your behalf. They may give you a different contact. They may just say, actually, Wendy's really busy right now. Let me just forward you on to HR, which is great. When an employee forwards you to HR, especially after talking to you, that's a really good sign. So that's okay. Often people are willing to do more for you than you are willing to ask for. So defer to your mentor's expertise about next steps. It will build likability just by showing them that your job search is not more important to you than their brand is. You're not going to put them at risk under any circumstance by following up a third or a fourth time on Wendy. So ask them what they would like for you to do and do that thing. It's an easy way to build likability. Once you've given them that 2-week update, just put a recurring monthly reminder on them and ping them every month. The first ping will look like this. It'll be basically 3 parts. The 3 parts of it will be recap the best piece of advice they gave you the last time that you spoke. My recommendation, put that in your thank you note. Give them something specific. So thanks again for your help last month. Per your advice, I started reading Ad Age and Brand Week. So recap the advice they gave you. Second point, give them a specific example of how you benefited from that advice. So I'm already feeling more comfortable discussing CPG-related topics as a result. Okay, that's the benefit. Third point of your update email is, what should I be doing next? Might you have any additional suggestions? I'm eager to learn and really appreciate your help. So your monthly update emails look like this. Recap their best advice, cite a specific benefit of that advice, and ask for additional advice. If they don't have additional advice, you just become personal in your next check-in. Are you traveling for the holidays? I'm going to be seeing my family in Florida. Thank you again for your help. Do you have any additional suggestions? I really appreciate your help. Thanks again. What we're doing here is something called the Ben Franklin effect. Ben Franklin effect, it's a behavioral economics term that now bears Ben Franklin's name because he identified it in his autobiography hundreds of years ago. He found that the best way to deepen relationships is not to repay favors, because that makes a relationship tit for tat. It has to stay in balance. It effectively changes a social norm into a market norm. The best way to deepen relationships in a predictable way is to allow imbalances to exist. It's to ask for a favor and then ask for another favor. So in Ben Franklin's autobiography, he outlines how he got a wealthy landowner that moved to town on his side to get re-election to the assembly, not by sucking up to this guy, but by finding out he is a rare book collector. He asked to borrow one of his books. He returned a few weeks later with a handwritten note saying, I want you to know I acknowledge the magnitude of this favor. He never offered to repay the favor. And he said from that point forward, that man became one of his best friends and an advocate for life. So that's the Ben Franklin effect. Don't feel the need to force articles upon your contacts. Instead, just accept the fact that they're smarter than you about this career space. They've worked in it. You haven't yet. Let them do nice things for you and keep doing nice things for you. Be a good mentee. That's the best path forward for deepening these relationships in a predictable fashion. Google it. Really interesting story. Okay, so that's how we keep these relationships current. You prompt these people on a monthly basis to let them know, remind them that you're still out there. Let me know if you know how to help. And once you push play on this process, you send your first 5 emails out, you keep 5 organizations active simultaneously. So as soon as you get closure with one, they say, we like you, we're going to interview you on December 15th, if not before. Let me know if you haven't heard from anyone on my team by December 1st. You're done. So move on down to number 6, because we have bandwidth to start with a new company now. If another one says you're not work authorized for us, we need people who are US citizens only, or you need previous experience before we'll hire you, that's just our business model, fine, cross them off and move to number 7. You are the bachelor in this process, not one of 25 bachelorettes. There are plenty of companies just like them, so you move to the next one on the list. You don't feel bad. Now, again, using this process, you'll be done by the time you get to number 10. I've only had 2 people ever get to 15. So just that's what to expect in this process. So let's recap the section, then we'll do questions. Big takeaways from this section. Be likable, don't sell yourself. Nobody likes being sold to. Ask reusable questions that are flattering and fun to answer. Don't try to stump the recruiter. Nothing good comes of that. Third, get the referral. That's the goal. If they don't offer it in the conversation, follow up a week later over email to ask for the referral explicitly then. You are fishing for lobster in this process, not fishing for fish. This is my final point. When you fish for fish, you put bait on a hook, you throw the hook water, fish swim up, and you have dinner. There's some correlation between effort and results. The job search is not like that. Fish do not swim up. It's more like fishing for lobster. Lobster don't swim up to hooks. So what you do when you're fishing for lobster is you buy cages that you bait, you drop them in the water, and you check them every day or two to see if you caught anything. Now, you never know with certainty if any of your lobster cages will ever catch you a lobster, but you do know with certainty the more cages you have in the water, the better your odds are of catching a lobster eventually. So each referral that you get is a lobster cage that you're dropping in the water. You never know which one's going to come through for you, but you know every additional one you get gets you one referral closer to employment. So 8 hours spent doing the 2-hour job search is not going to be fun. It's not even going to be particularly efficient, but it will bring you 8 hours closer to employment in a way that spending an equivalent amount of time on Indeed.com firing off resumes, ruining your own confidence simply will not. That's the equivalent of marching furiously in place. I don't wish that on anyone. So let's do a quick final exam, and then I'll have a little time for questions. Okay, from step 1, prioritizing targets, how many employers minimum to start? 40, excellent, well done. Okay, second, for contact, that's Google stalking, outreach, 3B7. You'll encounter 3 kinds of contacts: boosters, obligates, and curmudgeons. Excellent. Okay, final point, Tiara framework. What's the ultimate near-term goal of an informational meeting? Referral, excellent. Okay, I got nothing more for you. Thank you so much for spending your equivalent of Friday night with me. Thank you. Thank you very much.